What's up, Space Pirates? This is your captain, the delightfully devilish Dr. Disaster, and today I'm amused to report that it is now mainstream to acknowledge that comic book films are dying.
Well, it's about time!
You know that something has gone horribly wrong when not even the corporate butt-kissing press will cover for the likes of Disney and Warner. Now, for all you heroes out there who spend your energy protecting the poor, innocent, multi-billion-dollar corporations from monstrous, independent voices like my own who would dare to speak words unapproved by the corporate message machine, I have to ask a question. What do you have to say now?
Well, we're waiting.
It's amazing how many of these wokesters like to argue with me on Twitter or in the comment section trying to say that Marvel and DC didn't lose money on their films. But why then would this article talk about the death of comic book films as if it was a foregone conclusion?
I'm sorry, could you speak into my good ear?
In this video, we are going to read this article and see what they have to say. Sadly, the author stops short of identifying why the comic book film industry is perishing. The reason they give is, well, we'll talk about that in a minute. In the meantime, pour one out for the former king of cinema because this video is going to sound an awful lot like a eulogy.
He's dead, Jim. He's dead, Jim. He's dead, Jim.
Alright, me hearties, make sure to follow me on Twitter. My handle is Dr. Disaster1. In any event, let's dive into this article and see what the mainstream has to say about comic book movies. The headline reads, "Why the fall of comic book movie culture is inevitable." It's not just the bad sequels, it's far simpler. The fantasy heroes have been strip-mined. Okay, well, they're off to a good start here. I completely agree that these heroes have been strip-mined. These corporations who own them now do not treat these characters like beloved cultural icons. They are treated like cash cows because that is all that these soulless corporations understand. When you have an entity like Disney or Warner comprised of thousands and thousands of different people, that is what happens. Disney is not a person. It's a business, and businesses have a particular way of viewing assets. So what they've done is refined, say, a character like Captain America down to his barest elements. They've got, his shield, a patriotic American costume, his bravery, and a desire to help people and be a hero. They've distilled him down into a basic formula, and they're applying that formula to new characters now in an attempt to pander to people. We've got a black Captain America, and in the meantime, they've managed to lose the very human element that made Captain America appealing in the first place. We liked his character, we liked who he was, we liked this scrappy but scrawny kid, Steve Rogers, who had no business being on a battlefield in World War II era, but whose heart led him to greatness. We like Steve Rogers. Captain America isn't a costume, he's a person, and if you argue with that, then you are arguing against the very purpose of literature and entertainment, to suck us into a story and make us believe that these people could be real. Like I said, I like the phrasing that they use in the first part of this article, but I can tell you they are not going to reach the same conclusion that I have. Let's continue. comic book movie culture didn't just stumble this year, it face-planted, giving us one movie after another that fans didn't much care about and that the corporations backing these films took a disquieting loss on. And that's not how it was supposed to go. According to the gospel of 21st century Hollywood, the words comic book film and box office disappointment are not supposed to appear in the same sentence. When they do, not just once, but over and over and over again, the tea leaves are telling us something ominous and maybe definitive. Now, it's interesting to note the use of the term reading the tea leaves here. Many of us who critique these films and follow their production use that term, reading the tea leaves, to describe our attempt to discern what is happening behind the scenes at these companies. But now, they are trying to read us. They don't understand us. They are desperately trying to change that, but in order to do it, they would have to admit that this woke stuff has killed them. And frankly, that is a core part of the identity of many of the people who work in the film industry and the journalistic media that covers them. So they will not, they can't admit that it's unpopular. They can't admit it. And if you know that, then the rest of this article makes a lot more sense. Continuing on, it says, why in 2023 did this happen? The analysis that has mostly been offered is simple. The movie companies served up mediocre superhero product. That's why they, and we, suffered. If it had just been one or two duds, the situation might have been explained away. But when you think back on Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, and Shazam, Fury of the Gods, and The Flash, and The Marvels, and Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, the pattern is clear. It's not simply a Marvel or DC thing. The primal thrill and popularity of comic book movie culture took a major hit, and it may be fading away. And yet, in the very drubbing these movies received at the box office and in the drumbeat snark of critical reviews, you might say there's hope. Comic book movie culture is, after all, only as good as the movies it gives us, and this was the year that the corporations, let's name names, Disney and Warner Brothers, failed. They made bad movies. What if they'd made good movies? Okay, time out. Why are these bad movies? Stop and ask yourself that question. I would agree that the 2023 list of superhero films look terrible. I wouldn't know firsthand because I didn't watch them, and that's pretty telling. Keep in mind, I'm the sort of guy who goes to good movies at the theater multiple times. For instance, I saw Return of the King 7 times in the theaters. I saw the original Iron Man 4 times in theaters. I saw the original Avengers 4 times in theaters. I saw Infinity War 3 times in theaters. So why is someone like me tuned out now? How can someone like me tell that all these movies are bad without having gone to a single one? What is the common denominator? It's really quite easy, and I promise you that the writer of this piece knows it, but he can't bring himself to admit it.
Put a chick in it, make her gay!
It's wokeness. They changed these characters to pander. They brought out the D-list and F-list characters, trying to pander by making sure that there's plenty of female and minority representation, but by pursuing this corporate PC bullshit, they forsook the humanity and joy of their storytelling, which propelled them for the longest time. They abandoned characters that hardcore fans adore in the hopes of bringing in new fans, and the hardcore fans abandoned them. They, that is Disney and Warner, broke a basic business tenet. They sacrificed the customers who kept them afloat in pursuit of potential customers, and the new customers they got did not make up for the ones they lost. But anyhow, continuing on, the temptation to point a finger at the producers and executives and vilify them for their shoddy product has always been there, but now it's part of the new couch potato rebel culture. Critics on their reflexive high horse mostly hate comic book movies, and more they have used their reviews of them to chastise the man. The fans would seem to be on the other side of the fence, but they have their own collective resentments and rebel fire. This year, the critics and the Comic-Con horde stood shoulder to shoulder, joining forces to look the suits in the eye and say, "You did this to us, we're bored as hell, and we're not going to take it anymore." Once again, why? I ask you, what are the odds that every single comic book film that came out this last year were all bad for unique individual reasons? I would say the odds of that are extraordinarily low. There has to be a common through line that caused audiences to walk away, and that through line is clearly the woke agenda. There's a reason that South Park turned this mentality into a meme, after all, so successfully.
Put a chick in it, make her gay!
All that said, there's a larger reality about comic book movie culture that we tend to ignore. So let's state it outright. This shit is starting to fail because it is spent, because it's been used up. I'm not just talking about Ant-Man or The Flash. I'm talking about the characters who got us in the door in the first place. The iconic, larger-than-life ones: Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, Wonder Woman, Captain America, Thor, the Hulk, Black Panther. They were the mythic engine of this thing, and for a good long stretch, we didn't just want to see them on screen, we craved it. We needed them to be our gods again, and they were, until they weren't. Memo to James Gunn: gods have a way of losing power when you stick them in reruns. Are you sure about that, my dude? I mean, I won't disagree that there are diminishing returns to a certain degree, but would you look at the last Spider-Man movie? That was one of the last superhero films to do well in theaters, despite the fact that there are now double-digit Spider-Man movies. It succeeded in a massive way because we as a culture love the character and they hadn't yet made him unrecognizable. It's as simple as that. But anyhow, the former US President George W. Bush has long been used to illustrate the maxim, he was born on third base but thinks he hit a triple. Comic book movie culture is sort of like that. In the old days, i.e. the first 90 years of Hollywood, up to and including the Lucas/Spielberg revolution, movies were made the old-fashioned way. They were imagined, usually out of whole cloth. Sure, there were sequels and remakes, there were literary adaptations, highbrow and low, and Star Wars in 1977 riffed on the pulp sci-fi serials of the 40s and 50s, though the vast majority of the audience for Lucas's film had never seen those serials, so yes, Hollywood has always been a great big recycling machine, but there's a difference between imitation and IP. And I agree with this sentiment completely. Imitation and IP, that is to say intellectual properties, are different. Imitation is when a director or writer is inspired by something that came before and they build something new from this inspiration. And IP is when you churn out the same tale over and over in slightly different ways, like say maybe changing the skin color of a character. The latter is the most corporate mentality imaginable, but once again, the writer refuses to drill down to the bedrock of why the comic book stuff is suddenly failing so spectacularly. Sure, Batman, Spider-Man, and Superman have probably had too many movies made about them, but none of them had any films that came out last year. Why did all of these lesser-known characters all suffer? Why is interest down across the board? What about these films caused them to crash? Ultimately, this writer is using the same tired excuse that Star Wars used for Solo: A Star Wars Story. It was just Star Wars fatigue, they said. Now they're calling it superhero fatigue. Well, maybe there's at least a morsel of truth in there. It is fatigue. Because these corporations are, in fact, strip mining these beloved cultural icons for every last inch of profit. And in so doing, they're injecting their PC, soulless, robotic philosophies into these stories. In trying to appeal to these groups who want to be pandered to, they are abandoning their core audience. They are stripping their stories of basic humanity and putting out bland, safe, corporate schlock. Wokeness, after all, is just corporate speak passed down to small minds that are susceptible to big business propaganda. And those people are not typically comic book mega fans. They might pretend they are. They might watch The Big Bang Theory and think, hey, geekiness is cool now, so I'm a geek. But they don't actually understand geek culture, and they are not truly in it. That is why the industry is failing. But what do I know? I'm just one of the jackasses who used to help prop the industry up with my enthusiasm for it. And now I actively call for people to boycott and ignore these movies. My journey definitely cannot be important. They should probably continue to ignore me and everyone like me.
Thanks for watching, me hearties. If you haven't already, your captain is inviting you to subscribe to the channel and become a part of the crew. Life as a space pirate may not be glamorous, but there's always plenty of booty.